The Tale of a Goldfish. There was once a small goldfish who swam round and round in a ball. He was a pretty little fellow, and when he was first put in the ball, he felt very merry and bright. He'd been in an enormous tank with hundreds of other goldfish, and it had been fun swimming here and there with big and tiny fish. There had been plenty of friends to play about with, and it was fun to chase one another round the tank. He belonged now to a little girl called Mary. She had no pets at all, so she was excited when her granny gave her a goldfish for her birthday in a jar. "Here is the money to buy him a bowl to swim in," said Granny, and Mary went off proudly to buy a nice little home for her pet. The money didn't buy a very big bowl, and the goldfish soon grew tired of swimming round and round it with no one to play with him. His pretty fins drooped, and he stayed still in the bowl instead of swimming around fast. Mary wondered what was the matter with him. "Do you think he's lonely?" she asked her mother. "Do you think he's bored?" "Well, yes, I do," said Mummy. "After all, most fish have an interesting life in a pond, where they can swim in and out of waterweed and pass the time of day with a snail or two, and other fish." "I hope he's not going to die," said Mary anxiously. "Mummy, you know that pond over by the mill? Well, it's full of waterweed. Could I go and get him some? He might like that. He could swim in and out of it then." "Yes, that's a good idea," said her mother. "Also, waterweed would help to keep the water pure. It sends up little bubbles all the time, you know, Mary. We wouldn't have to change the water so often if we had waterweed growing in it." Daddy came in just then and looked at the drooping little fish. "Perhaps he's got a chill," he said. "When did you change the water, Mary?" "Yesterday," said Mary. "It got so thick and horrid." "Did you make sure that the new water was as warm as the old?" asked Daddy. "You see, the water in the bowl gets warm when it's in here, but the water from the cold tap is very chilly." "Oh, I never thought of that," said Mary. "Poor little fish. I gave him water straight from the cold tap, and I could so easily have added a little warm water to it. I expect he has got a chill." "Well, if you have a pet, you must take great care of it and cherish it," said Daddy. "After all, a pet depends on its owner for everything, whether it's a horse, a dog, or a little goldfish. We'll have to do something to make your fish happy and well again." "Let's go to the pond and get some weed, Daddy," asked Mary. "And we might be able to find a snail or two to keep him company. Would he like that, do you think?"
"Oh, yes, and as he can't eat the snail and the snail can't do him any harm, they'll be quite good friends," said Daddy. So Daddy and Mary set off after their dinner and went to the small pond over by the old mill. It was a quiet little place with 2 or 3 kinds of weed growing in it. Mary bent over the water. "There are plenty of snails, Daddy," she said. "Different shapes too. Look, here's one with a long, thin spiral shell, and here's a dear little coiled one. Shall we have one of each kind?" "Oh, we'll take half a dozen," said Daddy, "and plenty of weed. We'll take more than we want and put the extra into a pail, so that if the weed in the bowl dies, we shall have plenty of fresh weed to hand."
Mary saw something moving very slowly at the bottom of the muddy pond. She put in her hand and scooped out a funny little creature encased in a tube-like shell. "Look, Daddy," she said, surprised. "Is this a snail too? It's quite different from the other snails we have."
No, that's a caddis grub," said Daddy. "He has a soft little body, so he makes himself a hard tube to keep his body safe. He can put out his head too, look, and he can crawl about in the mud, but he can hide his head in case when an enemy comes near. He'll one day grow wings and fly away, a little caddis moth."
"Oh, he'll be quite safe with the goldfish then, won't he?" said Mary. "Let's go back now, Daddy, and give him the weed and the snails and the caddis grub for company."
"We'll empty some of the pond water into his bowl too," said her Daddy. "It may contain tiny water creatures that the goldfish will like as a change of food. Come along." So home they went, and soon the goldfish bowl looked a very different place. It had 3 or 4 strands of different weed floating about, and quite a number of snails crawling here and there, and the funny little caddis grub. The goldfish was most excited. His fins spread out, he swam around merrily, and he went to look at every snail in his bowl. "He's making friends," said Mary. "Oh, isn't he happy now, Daddy? I wish I could tell everyone how to make their goldfish happy, and if he only has a bowl to swim in." Well, I've told you, haven't I?